So, this is not a flex, because when you turn a certain age, it doesn't flex anymore. But my birthday was Friday. And I used to look forward to birthdays. You know what I'm saying? Like, it would be like May 1st, which is like a month after my birthday almost. And I would be looking forward to the next one already. When I turned 12, and you're like 9, you know. And now I'm like 49, and you're like, some of you are like, he's still a kid, you know. And you're going, yeah, we'll just get to Tuesday, and we'll be fine. If you got Mary Jane in the room, like, Mary Jane is 11 years old. She turned 11 in December. And she has been looking forward to her 15th birthday since she was 8. Right? In my family, that's when you can have a cell phone. At the parent's discretion. But Mary's pretty certain that when you get a cell phone, the entire world becomes yours, right? When I have a phone, then I can have a car and a boyfriend. Hold on, wait a second. What are we talking about here, you know? And she's just so looking forward to these things. And we get those kinds of pieces that we really look forward to. We get to a spot sometimes, though we're looking backwards is better. Our looking forward feels like it's not so far enough, and that maybe we finally arrived at looking forward and we start to look back. And then at some point we get so to a space where the thing that we most look forward to, depending on where your faith may lay, is actually being with Jesus. And we go, this is the thing I most look forward to. And really what we mean by that is we look forward to the time when everything is made new. Because we've had our fair share of sorrow and shame. And whether we like to admit it or not, we've had our fair share of sin and suffering. And we're ready for something new. This morning, our text talks about that time that we often refer to as the days to come. And many Christians look forward to these days. They are very debatable in terms of the Christian thought. I am not going to teach this morning with a bunch of charts and timelines, just so you know. If you've been around the Christian experience, a lot of people like to order the events of what is to come and try to help us see through these things. Jesus doesn't necessarily do that in this passage, so I want to honor the way he taught rather than the way we may like to think, if that's fair. However, in that same conversation, we do a Wednesday night discussion centered around the Mark text that goes a little bit deeper and a little more conversational than what we often get to on a Sunday morning. And I told the group last week who's been meeting with me, I said, if you guys want to, rather than digging deeper through Mark, we can bring some of those insights in, but I would be more than willing to open up the floor for extra questions. So if you have those kinds of end times questions or you're end times curious, that's what we're going to do Wednesday night, 6:30 in the Cornerstone U Rooms. We'd love to have you a part of that. And for those of you who are watching online, I would even say if you have questions about those kinds of things, feel free to send those questions in, and I would be glad to answer them as best as possible. The space that Jesus enters into in Mark 13 doesn't enter into a theological classroom. He's talking to his disciples in a very real setting. So for our sake today, what I would like to do is I'm going to read through the entire chapter 13. I'm going to pause and explain some things from the text, some notations that we should just be aware of, and then I want to take us back through from the beginning to the end on things that we can expect and how we should live. That's the outline for the morning. I don't often do that when we get into these kinds of spaces, but I think it's worth our time as we wrestle with these kinds of thoughts. So here we are. Jesus in the Olivet Discourse. You find this same discourse in Matthew also. Matthew's is a little bit longer. We call it the Olivet Discourse simply because of its location. Jesus is at the Mount of Olives, and he's talking to his disciples about things that are going to happen as they go. So I'll pick up in verse 1. We'll read through verse 2 of chapter 14 because that's where this whole story will end. As he was going out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Teacher, look, what massive stones, what impressive buildings." Jesus said to him, "Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left upon another. All will be thrown down." So chapter 13 picks up where chapter 11 ends. So chapter 11, the ending, all of chapter 12, and now the beginning and through the course of the beginning of chapter 14, that all takes place in one day's time. So we think about how quick Mark has moved through 3 years of Jesus' life. He's slowing way down here towards the final week. And the end of chapter 11 through the very beginning of chapter 14, we are still on one particular day. If you track a timeline with the kind of calendar that you and I would use, we're probably on Tuesday, right? But they wouldn't have had the same kind of Roman calendar that we work with today, but we would look at it as potentially the Tuesday of Jesus' last week. While he was sitting on the Mount of Olives across from the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will these things happen? And what will be the sign when all these things are about to be accomplished?" So if you've been with Jesus and you watch him teach, and the things that he has said so far have been truthful and authoritative, and they're coming, and now he's saying, I tell you, not one of the stones of this temple will be unturned. You might go, when is this going to happen? Like, that's where we all live when it comes to this kind of end times dynamic. We go, when is this going to happen? We're so concerned with the specific timing and the order of the events. And partially because if you're a Jew, which Peter, James, John, and Andrew would be, and you're saying that the temple is going to be overthrown, the temple was the center of everything you knew about Jewish life. So when Jesus says the temple is going to be overthrown, he's essentially saying your entire life is going to be flipped upside down. Everything you know about the way and practice and the order of things here in Jerusalem is going to flip on its head. That's going to create some emotions, right? And so they come to him. They're not just trying to ask and get a grade in a class at this point. These guys, they want to know what's going on. So Jesus tells them, watch out so that no one deceives you. 4 times we're going to see that phrase, watch out, come up through here. It's a significant word when it comes to it. The word that was used here is not used for just paying attention. It's not just being aware. That word would have been exclusively used in the culture to talk about the watchman of the house or the watchman of the city. So not only are we talking about paying attention and being aware of what's happening around you, we're also talking about being the kind of person who is on the look for the benefit of others. Almost like a guardsman. Most of the time, and most commentaries don't pick on this word deeply. They just talk about paying attention and being aware. And you can go search Google or go search YouTube and find sermon after sermon after sermon that talks about you being personally aware. But the verb that's used is distinctly describing the kind of person who's on guard and on watch for the benefit of a family and the benefit of others, for a household or a city. And you go, as believers in Jesus, if that's who you are, that's the kind of person we're supposed to live as today. A person who's on watch, not just so that you get to go to heaven before somebody else, which is how some people treat it, but to be on watch for the benefit of others. How do we help people still connect with Jesus as these times get close or get near and we see these signs? It should be all the more urgent about how we live life. Many will come in my name saying, I am he, and they will deceive many. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, don't be alarmed. These things must take place, but it's not yet the end. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places, and famines. These are the beginnings of birth pains. But you, be on guard. That's that same word in Greek is now used here, even though the English gives it a different flip. They will hand you over to local courts, and you will be flogged in the synagogues. You will stand before governors and kings because of me as witnesses to them. It is necessary that the gospel be preached to all nations. So when they arrest you and hand you over, don't worry beforehand what you will say, but whatever you say will be given to you at the time, because it's not from you, it's from the Holy Spirit. Brother will betray brother to death. A father, his child, children will rise up against parents and have them put to death. You will be hated by everyone because of my name, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. Let me pause there real quick. So many times, especially in evangelical tradition, we talk about until the whole world hears the gospel, Jesus won't return. And so we get into this dynamic where we want to send missionaries into every little village and all these different places, which I think is significant, by the way. It's important. And part of the hope, and catch me here on this, right? Part of the hope isn't necessarily so other people will believe. Part of the hope is to make Jesus come back faster. Does that make sense? You might have felt that way before. Jesus isn't saying this is the accelerant to his return. He's saying it is necessary for the good news to go everywhere, right? You will be witnesses to these kings. You will be flogged in synagogues. You will stand before governors, and you will be my witnesses. It is necessary that the gospel be preached to all nations. That in and of itself is significant. Stop there. It doesn't have to be conditionalized to be about Jesus' return. He's saying the gospel is so important. It's for the entire world. The good news of God is for all of creation. And this is what we're going to see. It's not about a program to get everything set up so that the right conditions can be for Jesus to come back even faster. God has always been independent of our timing. He has his time. He knows exactly how the universe is going to work. He knows exactly when the fulfillment of time will be. And it's not dependent on your missionary work. It's significant because the gospel, the good news, is for everybody who's ever drawn breath. That in and of itself should be motivation. We don't have to usher in the kingdom. The kingdom has come through Christ. But to be in that space of telling people about the love of God because he's for them is significant. It is necessary, Jesus says. Not for his return. The gospel going to the nations is what's necessary. Don't miss that. We often get that caught up in our end times dynamics. He continues, when you see the abomination of desolation standing where it should not be, let the reader understand. Then those in Judea must flee to the mountains. A man on the housetop must not come down or go in to get anything from his house, and a man in the field must not go back to get his coat. Woe to pregnant women and nursing mothers in those days. Pray it won't happen in winter. For those will be days of tribulation, the kind that hasn't been from the beginning of creation until now, and never will be again. If the Lord had not cut short those days, no one would be saved. But he cut short those days for the sake of those he loves. Then, if anyone tells you, see, here is the Messiah, see there, do not believe it, for false messiahs and false prophets will arise and will perform signs and wonders to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. So you must watch. I've told you everything in advance. The abomination of desolation would be a statement so critical to Jewish thought. It goes back to Daniel chapter 9, chapter 11, chapter 12. 3 times this abomination of desolation is mentioned. In the days of Alexander the Great, his conquerings would be divided among his generals. One of those generals, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, would be championed to Jerusalem. It would become his. Antiochus, a pagan worshiper, would take over the temple there in Jerusalem. He would build a statue of Zeus there in the center where the Holy of Holies would be, and he would sacrifice pigs on the altar. Now, pigs would be considered unclean. They were a symbol of everything anti-Jew, and to have the pigs as the sacrificial animal being considered unclean, that would be a desolation. Zeus being set up in the temple for worship would be a desolation. Jesus talks about this, and when you start to watch the language, it's not just a one-time event. It's a warning for things that are going to come. There's going to be wars and talks of wars. These are the beginnings of birth pains. When you see this happen, be on guard. And so this dynamic of the abomination of desolation isn't just a one-time waiting for the Antichrist event. That's how a lot of people will put it. Jesus is talking cyclically. When you see my people turn from me and set up things in their houses of worship that don't belong to me, be on guard. And that happens a lot. It's happened throughout history, not just in the Jewish dynamic. It's happened in the perspective of the church. These have been things where we've had people fight for power and conquest. I mean, you think if you know historically, France and Italy split the Catholic Church at one point, so there were two popes. And during that dynamic, even a professing Satan worshiper was pope. You watch the tensions between the Orthodox Church and the Western Church, the Greek Orthodox and the Roman Catholic, and that split over issues that had no place to be fighting about. You walk into churches today, and you see things that are elevated and highlighted far beyond the cross, everything from nationalistic perspective, where the flag takes center stage, to the dynamic of LGBTQIA issues being the center point of the church. When you walk in, that's what you see. Only Jesus is the focus of the church, period. And we watch all these different kinds of things historically get set up in place of him. Sometimes it's the ideologies that we have. We're this kind of church or that kind of church. Sometimes it's nationalism. Sometimes it's social issues. We have to keep Jesus elevated and center of the church. And we can watch these things happen. And there will be a day when this Antichrist dynamic does come and does deceive the world. And if you're not on watch, deception comes. That's where the next phrase comes out, right? They will do signs and wonders and lead people astray, if possible, even those who believe. Because we're not on watch. Being on guard is significant. Jesus says, in those days after that tribulation, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not shed light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers in the heaven will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. And he will send out the angels and gather his chosen from the four winds and the ends of the earth to the ends of the heaven. If you were to pay attention to how Jewish law and Jewish courtroom works, Jesus is unwinding the covenant of creation in this statement. If you go to Genesis chapter 1 and we watch the beautiful creation event where God speaks and unfolds, and there's the sun and the moon, and there's the stars, and there's light, and it's beautiful. You are watching the created order be unwound in what Jesus is saying. He's reversing the covenant. This is a courtroom-based dynamic, right? The promises weren't kept. We have sold our souls to other things, and God is going to reverse the covenant. And that's when judgment comes. It's a very profound statement that is more than just astronomical signs. It has a metaphorical weight to it where God is now bringing us before judgment. He is unwinding his created covenant. Then the Son of Man will appear. Learn the lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its branch becomes tender and sprouts leaves, you know that summer is near. In the same way, when you see these things happening, recognize that he is near, at the door. Truly, I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never fail. Now, concerning the day or the hour, no one knows, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. So keep watch, be alert, for you don't know when the time is coming. It's like a man on a journey who left his house, gave authority to his servants, gave each one his work, and commanded the doorkeeper to be alert. Therefore, be alert. You don't know when the master of the house returns, whether in the evening or at midnight or at the crowing of the rooster in the morning. But when he comes suddenly, he might find you sleeping. And what do I say to you? I say to everyone, watch. While all this is happening, chapter 14 brings us to the same day. It was 2 days before the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread, and the chief priests and the scribes were looking for a cunning way to kill him. So while Jesus has taught and been challenged in the temple, he's wrapping up his day, we knew that the leaders of the ancient world religious order and the social order had all got away from each other to plot. While he's teaching his disciples, these guys have moved away to plot and kill. Just an interesting dynamic to go, this is the end of that day. That was a lot to think about and take in. It is not the most exciting passage necessarily in terms of like feeling good about life. Like you don't necessarily walk away from this passage and go, wow, that was amazing. This is so good. Who wants pie? You know what I'm saying? It's the kind of thing where it makes you pause for a moment, and we should. The most encouraging thing comes right in the middle of the passage. This is the beginning of birth pains. A lot of us hear the word pain and we shudder. But birth pains are different. Because the entire point of birth pains is to usher in hope of a new generation. And that's what we're left with. As tense as the passage is, Jesus seasons the passage with hope and compassion. Pray it doesn't happen in winter. That's not a fearful statement. It's a statement of compassion. And we come to this space where Jesus is teaching and preparing his disciples. If he's on Tuesday, he has Wednesday and Thursday before he's arrested. Friday, he will be dead. Saturday, he will be in the grave. Sunday, he will rise again. His time is short. What happens to his disciples next is short. And he's preparing them with this incredible challenge and this very difficult teaching. In Mark, it is the longest teaching that we have recorded of Jesus. Matthew has more sermons to it. Mark, this is the longest collection of teaching in this one place. When we start to break these kinds of dynamics down, there are things for us to keep watch for. One of those, I think, we got to pay attention to. The world will shake. The world will shake. I remember talking with my grandmother and great-grandmother, and although we weren't a religious family by any stretch, for some reason, coming out of World War I and World War II and been witnesses as a married couple to things that happened in Korea and Vietnam and all these different kinds of spaces, they would always, I think my grandmother had this Bible verse memorized more than any other. There will be wars and talks of wars. And that's all she would ever say. And I had no idea what she was talking about. Sometimes she would sprinkle in a generic reference to God, but they would typically talk about if World War II was as bad as it was and that wasn't the end, don't be afraid of all the things that come across the news. And they had been eyewitnesses to World War II growing up in England. And you take that space, the world will shake. We all have temples in our lives that we assume are untouchable. This is where the disciples begin. Look at all these stones and this great building. This is amazing architecture, and this is all Israel's. Yeah, it's so beautiful, it's going to get flipped on its head and every stone will be removed. In 70 AD, the Romans burnt the temple, created a huge fire. All the gold in the temple melted into the walls of the temple. And guess what the soldiers did? They turned over every piece of stone to get every ounce of gold out of that piece, and you were just left with a waste of rubble. Within 35 years of Jesus' prediction, the temple is overturned. Every stone turned over just so these soldiers could grab out the gold. That day that Peter and James and John and Andrew, when they go talk to Jesus, to think about the temple of Herod, and that temple was absolutely incredible. Larger than the first, big, on a hilltop for everyone to see. What it represented, not just the power of God, but the way of their lives. And Jesus says everything's going to be overturned. You could imagine them looking at that temple and going, what in the world? There's no way. Jesus has lost his mind. But they don't do that. They go say, when's this going to happen? Because they were afraid. You know they're afraid. And we all have temples in our lives that we think are untouchable. Sometimes it's our health, right? You think about being 21, 22 years old, whole life ahead of you, fearless, completely fearless. And then what happens? Something. Injury, health, diagnosis, tragedy, something happens. Nations. How many years did the United States think it was untouchable and then Pearl Harbor happened? How many years did the United States think it was untouchable then 9/11 happened? Changed the game. Our economy, we've got the strongest economy on the planet. And all I hear right now is frets about the economy. Tariff this and tariff that and tax this and tax that and recession this and recession that. The world will shake. Even the things that we think are untouchable will shake. Jesus isn't alarmed when the world shakes and when things fall to pieces. Now, I can say this, even in our personal lives, Jesus is unshaken when our lives start to fall apart. That doesn't mean he's without compassion. That's significant to note, right? Jesus isn't just like sitting back and watching your life fall apart and not being caring or compassionate or aware or involved. But he's not shaken by it. The world may shake, but his throne doesn't. And with great humility, power, love, compassion, he enters those scenes. And he invites us to see him in it. And that's why he's teaching his disciples this. His purpose isn't comfort here, it's clarity. Like they go for comfort. When is this going to happen? We want to be okay. And instead of comforting them, he lays it out for them. This is what life is going to look like. And sometimes when we're going through those kinds of, like, we feel like our world is shaking, falling apart pieces, we want comfort. His Spirit will do that. But he also brings clarity. He constantly invites us back to see him as greater than our circumstance. Our circumstances can take so much control of our lives. And he regularly invites us to see that he is greater than our circumstances. He brings clarity. And that is more comforting than just going, it'll be okay. To know that he is greater and to live into that. We shouldn't confuse stability with security. His disciples were never out of security with him. Sometimes we confuse those things. When things are stable, we feel best. But sometimes it's when the world is the most upside down that we can see Jesus clearest. And he's the one who holds our security. He's got the whole universe. He's got it. And if he's got the universe, he's got you. Not just because you're part of the universe, but because personally and intentionally, God sets his love on you through Jesus. Not accidentally, not from a distance, very intentionally, very personally, he sets his love on you. And he holds you. He's got you. The church will endure. For all that the church has gone through and all the theological dynamics that the popular world is going through, deconstructing the church, scandals in the church, abuse in the church, people do bad things. Bottom line. I wish that wasn't the case. But people do bad things. They hurt other people. But this thing that Jesus has made, I was talking with a young man yesterday. He was explaining to me, as he's growing in his faith, he deeply loves Jesus, but he's not for sure what to do with the church. And then he laid out some of his tensions with the church, and maybe some of you feel the same way. And I said to him, I said, I hear you. I said, I got two thoughts for you. He says, okay. I said, first thought, it's really hard to love Jesus and despise what he loves. Does that make sense? I hear this from people all the time. I love Jesus, I can't stand the church. It would be really hard to love my wife and despise my kids. Because Corey loves my children so profoundly. She's a good mom. I think you're a good mom. And I could not walk beside her and despise my kids. That makes no sense. And you're going, well, why would you despise your kids? Happens in a lot of families. Kids get in the way, they change the plans. What do you do? Right? I cannot love Jesus and despise what he loves. And the scripture says it so clearly that Christ loves the church and gave himself for her. So I got to reconcile that. The other thing I told this young man is, I'm not for sure, and so I'm going to give you two different words, that Christendom and the church are the same thing. Christendom means the very experience and culture of everything churchy that has been over 2,000 years. All of the processes, all of the thinking, all of the books that have been written, all of the culture, all of the you can do this but not that kind of stuff, right? Christendom. Christ is the head of the church, but it seems like people are the head of Christendom. And although they're trying to do the same thing, philosophically, Christ's church endures. Christendom may not. If we listen to the Western world, they say we live in a post-Christendom culture. We've moved away from the central tenets where the church in little c is the center of the community and life. And we could see that happen. But the church, the church that Jesus loves and gave himself for, the true church will endure. And that's what we lean into. Jesus predicts hardship for his followers. Listen to what he says. The persecutions, the betrayal, the suffering, you're going to be flogged in the synagogues. That's a particular kind of whooping you would get, right? Like, I don't know how you call it in the Midwest, but where I come from, we call it a whooping. And that's a particular kind of whooping that you get. They have very distinctive dynamic, a punishment. It's very, every whooping is kind of punitive, right? But the number of lashes and the kind of device that would be used, they knew this, what a flogging was. Very painful, abusive, violent. These common guys, fishermen, tax collectors, tradespeople, they're going to stand before governors and kings and be witnesses to them. How in the world? They don't deserve that spot. Kings talk to kings. Who are these guys? And in that, there's going to be betrayal. You're going to be handed over. You're going to be betrayed. You're going to suffer. It's not the purpose that we want necessarily, but it's a refining fire that's intended to make the church bold, not weak. Because he confirms that his Spirit is with us. And so many times we don't want to face that. Like, we want to be popular and accepted. It's part of the human nature. And we exchange the acceptance of people with being the beloved of Christ. And this is a tension that we face. So then we wrestle with this. It's like Jesus' purpose in a crumbling world is actually expanding the invitation to be saved. When you're being captured and flogged and put before kings and governors, it is necessary. Why? Because the gospel must go forth. The whole point is to save the world. When everyone stands against you, if you believe in Jesus, and all the fingers are pointed against you, and all the backs are turned against you, the whole point is to love more and to be more truthful, to be more involved, like to continually lead and invite people to the power and the love of Christ. When the world falls to pieces, Jesus' invitation is the expansion of salvation, not to reduce it. And so we see these tensions take place. He doesn't promise ease, he promises presence. That the Spirit of God is with us through these things. We're not left alone. And if the Spirit of God is with us, the power of God is over us. If you believe in Christ, this is true of you. And no matter what happens in the world, you can face it. What if our greatest discomfort led to our deepest impact? I don't need to line up with a political party or a president or people of influence. I need to align my life with the King who sits on the throne and live into Him. Because when all hell seems to break loose on earth, is when heaven has its greatest impact. And that's where we got to live. See, most people that I talk to, when they want to know about the end times, most people want to talk about, when do I get to get out of this mess? And Jesus' invitation is to pay attention so that you can enter it better. It's a very different expectation. So I want to try to live into the expectation of Christ with this. When things get harder, how do we live better? Better witnesses in these places. Endurance isn't a passive waiting. It's a faithful presence in chaos. An active presence. Not running and retreating, but being here. This is where we are. Now, there are places where Jesus says, when this happens, you should run for the hills and don't go back to it. Not out of fear, but so that you're not participating with it. Remove yourself from this thing. Don't participate in the abomination of desolation. Separate yourself from it. Be different. Don't return to it. You know, it's a faithful presence in the chaos. The crisis will escalate, right? The world will shake. The church will endure. The crisis will escalate. It gets worse. You ever watch infomercials? Like one time I fell asleep watching the TV, which Corey typically doesn't shake me to wake me. She just lets me stay on the couch when that happens. And there's an infomercial sitting, because she probably sleeps better, you know. Doesn't have to put up with my snoring or whatever. And I wake up and it's like, but wait, there's more. That's all you hear. Why? Why does there have to be more? Just go off the TV. The crisis will escalate. There's a near crisis. So when Jesus teaches this, and this is true when you read most prophecies through the scriptures, you'll see the near fulfillment when you pay attention to history. Jesus is talking, and the near fulfillment, the near crisis is the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. It's a major, major event historically. So that event's going to happen. It's going to walk through what these guys are experiencing. They're going to see some of these very same things right before their eyes. The prophetic crisis, what Jesus is talking forward throughout history, is there's going to be an intensity in anti-God behavior and action in the world. More people will turn against God than turn towards God. It's going to be an increase. And that people dynamic may even mean just the influence, a greater influence of anti-God behavior and action that is being displayed and propagated. It sounds a little familiar, right? There's a prophetic crisis. And then when you take the next in, crisis breeds confusion. As the crisis increases, What happens when crisis happens? We start running for solutions all over the place. We got to make sure everything's good with Canada and everything's good with China, because in 3 weeks, not just the price of eggs takes a second mortgage, but I can't get toilet paper anymore. I got a doomsday article yesterday. The greatest thing you can do right now is stock up on toothpaste before it's too late. That was the first article I read on the first day of my 49th year. That's hopeful.
What kind did you get?
I haven't bought any. Look, man, look. Okay, since you brought it up. We were expecting our first child during Y2K. All right? Daniel was born in December of 1999. His due date was towards the end of the month, but he was born at the beginning of the month instead. And we thought, what are we going to do to prepare for Y2K with all of these, this baby's coming and the world's going to fall apart? Help me remember, I think we got 2 gallons of water, a bag of beans, and maybe some rice. And we didn't do any, we just left it aside. We decorated for Christmas early. And it's not to be nonchalant about those things. We could barely make it to the next week at that point in our lives, let alone preparing for a doomsday scenario, right? But when the crisis escalates, it breeds confusion. We got a very confused world right now. A very confused world. Your neighbors, your coworkers, your kids, family members, it's very confusing. And for Jesus' people, in those situations, our job is to stay rooted in the truth. To not get swept away in the hype, the fear, or easy answers, but to be faithful presence, faithful witnesses for people who don't have that kind of hope. Like when the world shakes, the invitation is for the church to shine. And the crisis will escalate. Crisis breeds confusion. I say it again. We have to see that. When you look at the world right now, that's where it's a very divided, very angry, very uncertain, very lost, very fill-in-the-blank world. And I don't see as a whole the people of God stepping into the gap to go, let's just talk about the truth. I see us grabbing the stick and stirring the pot. Rather than being people of peace in the midst of crisis, I see the people of God stirring the pot and being part of the worldly division. That's not who we're supposed to be. If you believe in Jesus, you are supposed to be a bringer of peace into those situations. It checks everything. Like that is the higher level mark. Not where you fall politically or whether you agree with tariffs or not, or war or not. Follow Jesus. Tell the truth about Jesus. Help bring the confusion down. Crisis reveals whether we are established in Christ or creatures of convenience. Do I just want what's easy for me? Or do I really want to pursue what Jesus has in store? And you'll find people land on those places all the time. Ultimately, Jesus will return. The world will shake, the church will endure. Crisis will escalate, Jesus will return. I could stop the sermon right there. I could have started there, saved you a whole lot of time. But Jesus saw so fit before he talked about his return that he wanted to let his disciples know this is what the world's going to be like. But the ultimate hope, the greatest act of compassion, is that we're not left in our suffering. Christ will return. The Son of Man will come with glory and power. The prophets talk about the day of the Lord. And when it's first announced, it says on that day, the blind will receive sight, the deaf will hear, the lame will walk, the captive will be set free. And then it talks about the terrible day of the Lord. So when John the Baptist is thrown in prison, and we've seen this earlier in the Gospel of Mark, just before he's killed, his disciples go to Jesus And they essentially ask him, are you the one who is to come? And Jesus says, go and tell John what you see. The blind receive sight, the deaf can hear, the lame can walk, and the captives are being set free. John's expectation, and we know this because he says, the winnowing fork is in hand, and the axe is at the root. John was looking forward to the second part of the prophetic passage. So when he sends his disciples to Jesus, it's not about doubt. It's about telling Jesus, come on, buddy, get about the work. I'll die here, and I'm okay with that, but you're not doing your job. You need to go judge the world. And Jesus just calls that, the tension comes from the same passage in Isaiah. Very same passage. So Jesus says, go tell them what you see. And now he talks about the terrible day of the Lord. The judgment, the tension, the unwinding of that covenantal experience. And how he returns. The stay awake tells us again, a spiritual alertness. Don't be filled with anxiety and pay attention for the sake of others. Don't give up on expanding the good news, Jesus says. His return is not about fear, but about fulfillment. And that's what we wait for, because when Jesus returns, all things will be made new. It has been a lingering and waiting period. I have people who tell me on a regular basis, if you do the math from this day to that day, then we know, and well, once it was like in the 90s, and then there was the whole Mayan calendar thing, and now someone told me the other day it's like some date in 2027. Cool. I just know that day's coming. And until that day comes, Jesus is no less in control, no less without authority, no less missing. He's still present in the world, and we're invited to participate in that if you believe in Christ. And if you believe, the charge of the end times isn't to reserve your place in the heavenly resort. It is your charge to go be witnesses. Help others enter that faithful place of good news. And if you're here today and everything I'm saying is just like, that's way above my pay grade, there's a simple invitation. Jesus, who left heaven and entered earth, who lived and died so that we could have life with him, he invites us to believe, to begin, to say yes for the very first time. The harsh judgment was already made on his shoulders when he died. Jesus died to conquer sin and death, and he did. He walked out of the grave unlike anyone ever before him. And he invites you to life with him today. Jesus doesn't tell us these things that we would be fearful, but that we could be fruitful. When he reveals the future to us, it's not to frighten us, but to focus us. There is a great day coming, and that great day will be both terrible and amazing. And when that day wraps up, it will be comfort and joy, and all things will be new. And that's the day we look forward to. But until that day comes, the church must be Christ's church, right here, right now. And that's the invitation. The good news must go forward. So what do I say to you? I say to everyone, watch.